This is the rear shock mount area right here that I'm going to cut out. So that's where I'm going to cut out. I just measure a 1/4 inch over and scribe a line or whatever. And I'll tell you why I have this all, the undercoating scraped off around here too. But some people say it's not necessary. I've ran it without cutting it, but it does make contact right there. Like I said, you can kind of get away with it by bending. You can bend this out, but really there's enough space in here just to cut a 1/4 inch out, and it'll clear everything. And the reason I have this cleaned off is so when I weld, it won't smoke and catch fire as much. And what I'll be welding is the gap from this shock mount to here, some down here, around this, and this brace. So get you a hammer and a pry bar and stuff and scrape this off and around and try to dig as much as you can out there. You can see how thick this stuff is. That seam sealer, and you can see through. There's places where you can see daylight through this. So to support the amount of force that's, normally this is just where a shot goes, but now you're putting the spring there. If you have a true coilover, you're putting the spring rate on there. So ours is like 5K in the rear. So there's a lot more force going into this. So I like to weld it all up. And this is pretty thin metal. Of course, this is thicker. It's easy to burn through this. So what I get is this is just 1/8 inch round bar from like Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware, somewhere like that. And you can see, you can lay that in there and take up that gap and even put it around here. So not to try to burn through it is easy. I was talking about welding up the upper shock mounts, and the other thing you want to do is weld up the torque boxes. And a lot of people ask, what's the torque box? What are the torque boxes? It's where your control arms attach to the chassis, here and here. And you can see they're just basically spot welded on. So all that can tear away from the load you're putting on it, especially in drag racing. They have like battle boxes, they're called, and they have kits to reinforce this or replace it. But really, it's better just to go ahead and tack weld them all up, stitch weld them. That way you don't have to mess with replacing them. It should last a lot longer. So you're going to get in here, around here, anywhere that you can reach, especially right there. I mean, there's nothing right here, and it's just spot welded twice. So you can see that there's just a gap there. get in around this. I'll probably even throw some in here and down here. You want to remove your back seat belt, pull this carpet back, and I usually get somebody to watch the inside of the car, because on the other side of this there is some of that undercoat. So either get a fan in there that blows, you know, some pretty good amount of air. That way, if there's little fire starts, you know, it'll blow it out, or have somebody watch inside while you're doing this. So the same for here. Just get around anywhere that you can reach, you know, weld those together. Get this, you can see the spot welds, and this stuff is sharp, so you can get in there with the grinder and clean that up with a flat disc. Clean up some of them sharp spot welded areas, and then stitch weld that. And then you have this one for the lower control arm. Pretty much the same thing. Get in here and just weld up wherever you can. Across here, all of this, down here, and I try to get in here if I can, anywhere I can get in there. Especially this seam right there. Get that. You can see on this side where somebody probably may have towed the car or hooked something to it. So see, this is all tore up and pulling away. So I'll weld that up, and then I'll hammer this over and hammer this down. See how this is not really supporting anything. So don't need that. ABS speed sensor. Yeah, there's a wire that also runs through here, so make sure, you know, for your ABS, whether you're using it or not, pull that out so you don't catch any of that on fire, melt anything. Yeah, I mean, you could even stitch weld this brace right here. And it kind of goes the same for this shock mount. You can stitch weld that there, and up underneath here. Even get in there a little bit, just a little extra reinforcement will help. And now just looking, I can see like that is kind of pulled away for some reason. So get a hammer, hammer that, and probably throw some get a wire wheel and clean this seam seal off, and even throw some stitches there. Once you have, like, I have the diff out to weld it and put gears in it, so if you take it all out, it's best just while you have all this room to get in there and take care of all that. Alright, so here's a comparison of no stitch welds and doing the stitch welding. You can see it's, I guess it's kind of elaborate. It seems like a lot, but I kind of just don't trust how the factory is, so I get everywhere I can and try to tack in something. Even in there, you know, I can see where the nut goes, but at least I can attach that torque box to this inner frame. And then as far as where there was that gap up in here, I just cleaned everything off with a wire wheel on an angle grinder, and then I hammered in this lip over. Some kind of wire brush, and I'll take a flat disc and kind of clean up some of these welds. I am definitely not a certified welder, but I can stick some metal together and make it structurally stronger than it was. So judge me if you want. You know, I'm not going for looks, I'm going for strength. I don't have a lot of time to try to get it all looking perfect. I'm not building a show car. I just want to strong, you know, I want a strong, reliable car. I try to do as best as I can, but also what makes it tough is, of course, I am outside, so I'm kind of putting up walls to block. It's windy, so try to block the wind. And I've tried to, you know, get all this to wire wheel. It's just almost impossible to get in there and clean the paint off. So you kind of just have to start striking an arc and get it going however you can through the paint. That's really, I guess I would say, the toughest part. And there's also just gaps, like in here there's gaps. So, you know, I could try to get filler rod and deal with all that, but basically I just kind of tack and fill in the gaps and connect them. This is where it was all torn up, and I'll clean all this up. But yeah, there was, you know, big gaps here, gaps up here. You know, you can see the gap that I've taken up right there. But I wanted to show you where I'm kind of welding. I mean, I even get in there, inside and around. Got that edge there, it was all beat up. I got everything underneath stitch welded, and then I've welded up my shock mount and the I believe it was 1/8 inch, yeah, 1/8 inch thick metal rod that I used to fill the gaps, and it was 48 inches long. That was long enough to fill the gap around here, to put it right here. So if you can see this line, that's where the rod is. I've welded from here down to the rod and then up to the rod. The edge of this is really thin, so I basically used I used a pry bar and a hammer just to kind of hammer that lip back, and then laid that rod right below the edge of this metal that comes up, because it's so thin, to attach this to the rod and then the rod down to here. That kept it from burning through the thin stuff. And then the leftover pieces I used right here to just fill this gap a little bit, and back here. And I did that for both sides. So there's another piece of that 1/8 inch rod sitting in there, around here, and then back there. And then you can see that this is welded up. So that just ties everything together. And then I do use a strut brace that comes from here across, just to add some more rigidity. And now you can see why I cleaned all this stuff off. This is what melted before, so kind of keeps the smoke and the flames down if you just go ahead and scrape this area. So you can see right there, and then in here